Welcome to the channel. Today, I'm going to take a look at this combo amp that I built, all from scratch. Built the cabinet and the chassis and everything else. And so I'll kind of show you here real quick, and then we'll go back in time and kind of go through this thing step by step. So if you want to build your own amp, kind of get some ideas from what I did here. This one I built, it's basically a clone of an amp that a buddy of mine has. It's a Chicago Blues box, also known as the, what the heck did they call it, the Little Buddy. So it was a Buddy Guy. That thing's heavy. Buddy Guy amp. And that's basically it there. But we're going to go back and take a look at how this thing started from the beginning. Well, the first step in cloning this amp here, I had to find a schematic. I didn't find anything on the internet, so I just quickly drew one up. And this way I can get this amp back to my friend. I don't have to have the amp sitting in front of me to recreate it. So, got the schematic finished, and then just a simple layout with an eyelet board. And for this build, I'm going to use these flimsy fiber boards that are generally for like building Fender style clones. These are terrible though. I mean, just like an original Fender board, they'll warp and twist and they look terrible. I'm only using it because I have so many of them and I need to get them used up. Normally I would prefer to use something like a phenolic board like this, that are good, thick, rigid boards. They don't, you don't have to put 1,000 standoffs in it to keep it straight. You could pretty much just use 2 at each end and they're good. Usually I'll use something like these turret boards. These aren't great for eyelets though, because you got to drill them out. And if you use a thick board like this one's 3 millimeters thick, it's hard to find 3 millimeter eyelets. There's a few companies that sell them, but they're harder to find. Like, you're not going to find them at like CE Distribution or any of their public companies. What are they? Antique Electronic Supply, Amplified Parts. I don't think Mojotone has them. Maybe Tube Depot. I don't know. It's been a while since I checked. But you can also get these in a 2 millimeter thick board, and then this will work for most eyelets. But you got to drill the holes out a little bit because these are designed for turrets. But they work good for eyelets as well. But you can get these fiber boards in various colors and sizes and shapes. They're just, they're just so flimsy. If you put a lot of time into making a really nice amp, and then you got this board in there that looks like this, after a couple of years of moisture and whatever, this is how they'll look, or like this, it's like you'll have your standoffs wherever you put them, and in between those standoffs, the board will start to do funny things. So I don't like to use them, but I have so many of them, I'm gonna use it anyway. So I have pretty much copied this layout exactly. It's just so much easier. If it's there, I can just make it exactly the same. I didn't have to, right? Like I could have used a board like this, but with this one being a little narrow, I could have used maybe a turret board and made it really fancy. But I'm not trying to make this the nicest, greatest amp I've ever built, so this will work out just fine. And it's nice to copy the layout exactly. This is not like a super high gain amp. It is very much like a JCM 800, as I mentioned before. But it's kind of a, very mellow style of Marshall circuit. So it's not a lot of gain. You don't have to worry too much about the lead dress and oscillation and stuff like that. So I could have just thrown it together however it went together, but it's just easy enough to copy the layout. I did change the bias circuit. I'm not going to use the dual pots. I'm going to use just a single bias pot. I prefer to use like the Fender style bias pot where it's a physical potentiometer. So I'm going to make the chassis about 1 inch longer on each side. I can space the power tubes out a little bit. and I'll put that bias pot right between them, right there. So other than that, it's pretty much a dead copy. And I've got all the components ready to go, all the orange drop caps. These are a 1% metal oxide resistor, or at least they look like metal oxide. So I've got all that, so pretty much everything I need, so I can go ahead and I can start stuffing the board, and I can get the amp back to my buddy Brandon. This is his go-to amp, so I know he's probably itching to get it back after I changed out these filter caps for him. So I'm gonna go ahead and stuff this board, and we'll see you after that. I just got back from the metal recycle where I picked up this recycled sheet steel here. But it's great to buy it this way because it's so much cheaper than buying brand new steel. This is like $1 a pound. And I got these extra pieces so I can build some other chassis for some other projects that I've got in mind. This one worked out great because it's already the width that I need. I just need to cut the length. And I think it'll end up being maybe 1/8 of an inch deeper than what this chassis is here. So this is going to work out really nice because I don't have a metal shear or a metal brake anymore. So I have to do it the old-fashioned way and kind of get creative with it. And the reason that I'm making my own chassis from blank steel, I mean, you can buy chassis that are kind of like this, but usually they're pre-punched and pre-drilled for like a 5E3 Fender style amp. They're chrome plated, they got screen print on them. You can make them work, but you know, I'd rather just have all the holes drilled exactly where I want them. So working through the layout here, and I kind of want to get all the holes drilled first before I bend the chassis, even though there won't be any ends on this chassis. And so, you know, I could kind of, like a C channel, I could stick it in through my table and put some wood under it, and I could drill it after it's bent. I don't really want to do that though. If I mark a hole in the wrong spot and drill it wrong, then I spent all that time trying to bend this chassis, and I pretty much got to throw it away. So I'm going to drill all the holes first, and then I'm going to bend it. So you can see I got the center, or the, you know, what would basically be, yeah, the center of the chassis where the eyelet board will sit. And then these are basically when I score it on the top, and then I'll bend it down. And so this will be the top, this will be the bottom. And I've got kind of a center line drawn here so I can get everything centered in there. And it's really not too difficult. I just kind of lay all the components out and make sure that where I marked everything before I start drilling and punching holes, that it actually aesthetically looks correct. I've done that before, you know, where I thought I measured everything right. You know, they say measure twice, cut once, but, you know, I've screwed it up before and thought I had it right, drilled it, put the parts on, and realized, you know, like one potentiometer ended up being like that, and it just looks really stupid. So just laying everything out, making sure it looks good. Now I'm going to start working on the sockets, and then we'll bend this thing. Well, I'm making good progress here. I got the components on the backside. But as I mentioned earlier about sometimes screwing up, I almost did. Well, I did screw up when I marked these. Everything that's not on the center line, I put on the opposite side. So, you know, like if, you know, these two sockets, the outer two preamp sockets are towards the edge here. Well, I had them flipped around so that they were towards the inside. Same thing with the speaker jacks and the bias pot. It's easy to get all mixed up whenever you're working backwards. So anyway, I got that stuff done, got the power transformer pretty much figured out where I want it. And I got my marked out for my output transformer and choke. So now I can figure out where this can go in and where I can put the screws to hold this down, where they're not going to interfere with the transformers. I just finished up drilling all the pilot holes. So I hit them all with a punch first. And that makes sure that the drill bit goes through where you want it to go through and it doesn't walk around on the steel. But I used a small drill bit just to make all these pilot holes first. And what I did was I just put the steel, after I drilled all the pilot holes, I put the steel on this thin MDF and went through and I drilled out all the holes. So that way I have a template. So if I screw up somewhere along the line, you know, cutting all these, or, you know, trying to bend along these lines, if I mess up the chassis in any way, I now have a template that I can set on this side and make another one if I need to. Or, you know, if at some point I decide I want to make another one, maybe with a different circuit, but using the similar chassis, I don't have to start all over again. And I labeled it there, Chicago Blues Box, so I know what this template is, because I've got a whole bunch of these from all the different amps I've built over the years. So now I'm going to drill open all these holes to fit all the components. And then eventually, after that, I'll get to the real fun part where I try to bend this chassis. Well, just plugging away here. I got these holes opened up a little bit, so now I can start with these step drill bits to open up the holes to the size I need for all the components. And while it's flat, is a good time to punch a serial number in it. And so yeah, now I can hog out these holes with these big old monster bits. And this is something you definitely want to buy good ones. If you go to Harbor Freight and you try and buy these things there, you'll never be able to cut through steel like this. So you need like a Milwaukee or DeWalt type of step drill bit. Ask me how I know. So it's definitely, those are well worth the money you spend for them, especially if you're going to cut more than just one hole. So, you know, not the one-time use tool doesn't cut it, literally, for drilling as many holes as I'm going to do in this. And if I, you know, I've probably done, I don't know how many chassis I've done just with this, with these drill bits. And yeah, they do a pretty good job. Okay, so now we're coming to the fun part. I gotta start drilling out these ginormous holes for these tube sockets. I kind of step my way up with this drill bit, and then I'll move over to the larger drill bit here. And you can see about a little more than halfway up is where we got to go on these on this larger drill bit here. So the little DeWalt guy here, it'll do it, but it doesn't really have enough torque, so it takes forever, and it'll bind up and it'll start kicking around. So here we go. See how this goes here. Not quite. Let's see where we at here. Looks like we got to go about one more step here. Okay, so I flipped it over, and you can see now it's fits in there real nice. But there's a little space there. That's not so bad. I just went to the next size up step instead of trying to get it in between. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I mean, that's fine if you don't mind a little slop in your life. And I just got to do two more. Well, after a couple of hours, finally got everything marked out and all the holes drilled. And all the holes to mount the sockets. Don't forget about those. That's about all. I just got to figure out what I'm going to do with the transformer. So, I don't know. Do I want to drill a big, or cut a big hole here so that the transformer can stick up through the chassis? Or do I use like a 1-inch standoff and just mount the transformer down here like that and just drill a hole in the center so the wires can come out? It's really, I don't know, how much motivation do I have? I don't like using standoffs at the bottom. It's just kind of, you know, a janky way to do it, but it's a heck of a lot easier than cutting out a big square hole. So I don't know. I'm going to think about this for a minute while I get something to eat and drink some water. and then we'll get back after it. Pull. Okay, the time has come now. I'm going to use the angle grinder to score a line where I'm going to bend this. That way it'll hopefully bend nice along that little divot. So I'm just going to run the cutting wheel. I'm not going to cut it all the way through. I'm just going to make a divot, maybe 3/4 of the way through. And I'm using this 90-degree right angle here as a straight edge. So that way I can keep the wheel up against it and ride it nice and straight. So I'm basically sacrificing this because it's gonna, it'll still work, but when I cut it, it's gonna kind of ruin this. I've done it before. And it's cut on this side. Now it's gonna be cut on the inside. And it makes a very sharp edge, so pretty much don't want to use these afterwards. But they're only a couple bucks, so, well, it's better than spending $35 to have someone bend it, and then $35 have them bend it on that side. So, here we go. Okay, so I got it cut to length. I got it scored, and now it's sandwiched between a couple pieces of steel plate. And now I'm going to try and bend it over. You can see it's kind of hard to see, but there's a line scored in it. Anyway, hopefully it'll bend nicely along that line. There's the other side. It worked. Not too shabby. Okay, so everything's all bent up in a good way. And I just cut these little end pieces that I can put on the end of here. So I'm going to tack weld those in. And then I'll clean this up with some acetone and shoot it down with some satin clear coat. Okay, so day 2 of the Blues Box clone. So I've got clear coat is on the chassis now, but it's a satin clear coat, so it really doesn't even look like it's on there. And I've got the transformer mounted in temporarily, but I'm glad I cut that hole in there so that I can mount that nice and flush because it's a fairly big transformer. Here's one I did a couple years ago, and I got the standoffs there to keep the transformer up, but this is a much smaller transformer. This is like a Fender Champ size transformer. This one here is significantly larger. So if I had to put this on standoffs, this may have ended up hitting the front speaker baffle board. So that's why I had to cut that hole in there. But at this point, it's pretty much ready for assembly, at least of the chassis components. And I was actually surprised. These are almost identical in size, completely by accident. So this is kind of a Fender Deluxe Reverb meets Princeton with reverb. And I built this, I don't know, maybe last year sometime. And I knew that the chassis was similar, but I did not realize that I made it almost exactly the same. That was completely by accident. But pretty neat either way. So yeah, now I just need to get the rest of the parts on here and get this thing wired up. Now I got the transformers solidly mounted up. I got the holes drilled. Unfortunately, you got to use a whole bunch of them with these flimsy boards. And I had to put the screws in for the transformers upside down. That way I can use like a countersunk type of screw so that they're flush. That way, when I put the board in here, the underside, it just sits nice and flat against the chassis there. And then I could put the eyelet board on top. Since I'm not using any standoffs, what I do is I kind of go through and just use a flap wheel disc on a grinder, basically to knock down all the solder bumps so that the board lays flat. And then it'll just sit down in there nicely, and pretty much got everything ready to go. There's a few wires that I don't have hooked up yet that I will put on once it gets in once the board's in the chassis, but for the most part that's it. I guess at this point now I got to get all the components put on, sockets and jacks and all that stuff, so that is the next step. Working through the spaghetti here now. Board is in, and I've got some of the sockets in there. Everything up front here is not quite in yet. I want to get these grounds all wired up, and just kind of get the wires kind of in a neater organization here, and then I'll start getting the pots and stuff on. But it's coming along, and it looks pretty nice. Looks very similar to that one there. So we're getting there.